Hello again, my friends. I have missed all of you. I've been away for a long time. My name is John Allen Namu. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to another edition of The Big Picture with me, Mr. Tom Mukwana, Ms. Justine Wanda. These people tried to engineer a coup, but Mungu ni nani? Mungu ni nani? I'm telling you. Nasema tuko imara. Tulisign broad-based hapa na wakasema nirudi.
Yeah, but
it's been a long time, and we apologize first of all for the delay in going on air at 6 sharp. We had a bit of an issue with the internet. These things do happen, but nonetheless, we owe you that apology. But thanks a lot, all of you who are streaming right now on YouTube, as well as on X. We're going to be trying to do that the same on TikTok as well during this episode. If not, then we shall have those snippets for you every week, and then we'll come back to you on TikTok as well. This week, we've got a very, very interesting guest, I have to say. It's a person that I know personally, and one that Kenya knows very, very well. Professor, lawyer, poet, academic,
very much. Those are many things you said about me. And now a teacher.
Yes, and a teacher of law. Professor of law. Once dean of the School of Law, right?
Yes.
Yes. Any aspirations to go back to that kind of a post, or you just want to be?
No, just professor of law, not administrative.
For those of us who are a little older, then we're on the wrong side of 30. We'll remember your role in the Kibaki government, also as member of parliament for Makueni. And Tom might remember you as the governor of Makueni County. So all of us have each had like a bit of a slice of your life in the public. But how I want to start this, because the conversation is a letter that you wrote to none other than President William Ruto on the 24th of February. Productions, allow me to address you on behalf of our country's Gen Z, and of course on myself. Accept our salutation of Shalom, Mr. President. This felt like a very velvet glove moment in the letter because it was very, very welcoming and very, very polite. But there's one thing that you said in here that I was quite surprised about in terms of the strength. You said, let me see, it's right here. Citizens are plainly saying your performance or your output is below your pay grade. What inspired you to say that specifically?
I think looking at what the president and his team have done from 2022 September, one noticed that almost everything that they try to do flops. And it's not easy to really say that this is what we have done and is of consequence. Unlike, for example, during Kibaki, a bit of first term of Uhuru and the deputy president. So I think in the letter I went through most of the things, that they had said they would do, whether it's affordable housing, whether it is fertilizer, where you almost got into trouble because of unearthing certain things.
Yeah.
So I saw that all those things don't really resonate with the citizen. They don't really succeed. And we had thought that the president was the one who moved the Uhuru presidency because he said so. So it was expected that now when he was the captain, he would do wonders for the country.
Yeah.
So I was struck by the seemingly very robust manifesto, which was crowdsourced actually, from the 47 counties.
You mentioned that actually in your letter, that how much consultation there was in the production of the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, and among other things. And I don't want us to stay so much on that point because people can read the letter for themselves. It's a very, very long missive, and we can find it on your Facebook page.
Yes.
As well as on the pen. Now, in the wake of the signing of this Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Misunderstanding in a sense, because it's incredibly vague what the objective was here. This Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between the Orange Democratic Movement and the Kenya Kwanza government. But I want to ask the question from this point of view. You were advising the president former, the late Mwai Kibaki, in a very, very turbulent time, 2007, 2008, and going forward, what do you think he would have done in this situation? Or what would your advice to him have been? If you were to whisper now, not a letter openly to William Ruto, but if you were to whisper some words of counsel that borrowed from
an election, it is contested, or there is the Gen Z movement, which is very potent, he would try to do something that is anchored within the law. He would not this memorandum, but I realize that it is some political something.
Some have called it a mongrel of political sort of like...
Because, first of all, it is the Gen Zs, the young people, who this time around, 2024, had an issue with the president and with the government. So one thought that if there is a memorandum to be done, they should be taken into consideration. One also thought that there should be public participation because the former prime minister going round and asking his party members what he should do, that's partial, partial consultation, because it's not public participation is countenanced by the constitution. So I think President Kibaki, with advice, and he would listen to advice. So that's an issue. Whether even if I was in a position to advise the current
whether
president,
the advice would be taken,
he would be there to listen, because you advise and you keep quiet. So I think that's a big difference of President Kibaki would have said, whatever we do, let us really anchor it in law, and particularly even a coalition would be a coalition like 2008 within the law. Actually, it was done within the constitution, but within the law. But now, when one looks at this particular document, first of all, they admit that they have done very many wrong things, including, the abductions, including devolution, undermining it, So then I asked myself, okay, since you have said that these things you have done and they are wrong, now can the young people go to court and say we want the compensation, and particularly when just some to pray, some to ask, why are you receiving money? They were brutalized.
Yeah.
So then even before the ink dries on this memorandum, the very things that it's saying are bad are being done. Then you also realize that it says there is need to establish a broad framework of consultation and all that.
So I need to have a drink of water.
It is two people.
Do I drink the water or do I put it down?
Continue having the
You need. I need. Yes. This one at you.
Then they clarify that this is not a political coalition. And they keep on repeating it's two people. So it's not even their political parties. And then they say they will create a political infrastructure and they will make resources available. So when I looked at it, I said to myself, then there must be another MOU somewhere else which says what they want. I think to just summarize, I think President Kibaki usually would have tried to say, where is the law so that it's clear what we are trying to achieve. Just like from the beginning when he says there's going to be the economic strategy for wealth and employment creation. So there's a document, there's a vision, 2030, there is a document so that the path is clear, is reasonably clear. But I think, whether it is BBI, whether it is NADCO, whether it is, these task forces, they are actually established in lieu of doing what the Constitution.
So BBI, that's actually a good point, because I was going to ask Tom to come in on this point. So actually, before I ask Tom to come in, the difference between the 2008 National Accord and what we have today, What to you is the difference? Because you see a lot of the things that we were talking about in 2008, right? That we were at a point of time in which this country was staring at the abyss. And there were certain things that happened, or certain promises that were made, but then that yielded into the 2010 constitution. So there was something tangible, if you want to say, at the end of that the promise of that accord, including things like justice, law and order reforms within government, the certain structures that then preceded the formation of the new constitution. I shouldn't call it new constitution now; it's quite old now. But Tom and Professor, you can chime in here as well as you, Justine. NADCO, BBI, which other accords have we had in these past 10, 12 years? Is there any distinction, or is it a distinction without a difference, Tom?
To me, it seems like, from what I read in the NADCO report, and it's a long document, 520 pages of it, but they had slight summaries.
Okay,
underneath
so
every
remove
section, right?
50 pages for the preamble.
Yes.
Remove another 30 for a glossary of terms.
Yes.
Remove 40,
For the
like
annex
300
section.
of the annex section,
Yeah.
and remove like 100
You have
of,
like
of
20
the word
left.
salad.
Yes.
Like what does it actually say?
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
why is there an insistence, and I think the professor can answer this, why is there an insistence of having documents that are very wordy and almost difficult to understand, especially if it's law related, and almost never a translation like the way the Bible is done? Like the Bible is available in every language, there's a Bible for kids, but
And it's,
the
and it's
Constitution...
to the point on the first day.
Yes, exactly. Like I know the first day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like is that like intentional to kind of close out people from understanding what's being signed, or is that like, oh, you need a lawyer kind of angle that a lot of I think higher institutions take, so that people don't know how to participate in that? Yeah.
If on most occasions there is no intention to implement what is in those documents, it's really a ceasefire document, and after there isn't the conflict anymore, after people are placated, then that's it, except picking those things that the elite want.
Yeah.
And actually that has been, the BBI picking those positions. NADCO, same, those positions. Even this MOU, most of what, apart from just the NADCO, everything else is already in the Constitution.
Absolutely.
So I think sometimes when you want to hide things, you make big documents when you don't really want to be held accountable. Because at least one would expect like a summary.
Yeah.
Although, of course, in NADCO, there is a chapter which says, now what are the things that are supposed to be implemented? There is that. But I think we have had so many of those reports, whether it is the Dumu report, whether it is, even there was a devil worship report, whether it
devil
is
worship report?
yes,
Fine.
yes,
I
there was
read
that
that
we were even inspired that.
Yeah, what's going
In the
on?
90s, there was concern about devil worship when we were having, I think, a crisis of values and what have you. And I remember them also having an investigation into the Freemason.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, carry on.
Yes. So you see Dumu report on land and identifying people who have taken land illegally, the Waki report, the Kriegler report on elections. So we have all those reports, but we never get to implementing them.
That's true.
And just like by and large, we haven't done a good job of implementing the Constitution.
That is true.
So it's a merry-go-round situation.
That's a very good point, which brings me to exactly what I was about to say. I was looking at this MOU 10-point plan, and around 9 things in that plan are already in the Constitution, just like you said. Just to make direct reference, the first one was strengthening devolution. We already have the Division of Revenue Bill, and there's a lot of allusion to the devolution system and how it's going to work in the Constitution. Secondly, inclusivity. The two-thirds gender rule is all over the Constitution. It's already there. Economic investment, That's something that he said in the manifesto, that is ingrained in the manifesto, and the whole bottom-up plan was supposed to make this work.
Yeah.
Then upholding integrity, chapter 6, leadership and integrity, that has been disrespected at the highest level. We've seen that in the appointments into cabinet.
4 years,
consistently,
decades,
right?
actually, yeah.
The fifth one, right to uphold the peaceful protest. Chapter 4, Bill of Rights clearly stipulates that. Audit national debt, this is something that didn't even need to be in here. It's something that you can actually, I think you make allusion to it and say that the Auditor General is an underfunded office, and I think it's intentional.
And there's
reason.
multiple agencies and institutions and organs of government that can do that. So you have the Controller of Budget who can give somewhat of a post-mortem.
Yeah.
You have the Office of the Auditor General that can do the same. You have the various parliamentary committees. You have the Budget Committee, you have the PIC, you have PAC.
Yes.
You have so many organs that can do this.
And if you remember, just a week ago after the revelations by the Auditor General, I think the leader of majority went on a platform on a Sunday and said that the Auditor General is misinforming and misinforming Kenyans.
Yes.
So it's sort of like unachukua na hii mkono alafu unapeana na hii mkono. It's such mixed mixed signals from the government, which then points to complete unwillingness, goodwill to implement the constitution. But then there's something that Prof said in his letter, and let me just find it. It's with regards to President Ruto's track record with the constitution, especially in 2010. You say, and I quote, "Come 2010 and you are back on the saddle, leading the crusade for vanquishing the current constitution. Clearly, if you had your way, the present day country's basic law would have been rolled back." And then you also, to your credit, mentioned that he raised the same document on swearing in day, and he said that he's going to uphold the constitution. I wonder what makes you make this statement from 2010 and his vicious opposition of the constitution to everything that we're seeing right now, which is largely unconstitutional and to the core that has zero goodwill. So what changed?
Well, I think in terms of, he had to say when he was campaigning that he will support the constitution, he will, support rule of law, constitutionalism, and all that. But part of why one kind of thought, why don't I write this letter, is because what you have seen consistently is disobedience of the constitution and of the law, So then therefore, I went back in my own thinking and I said, wait a minute, from 2005, he was not for the constitution, but at least I said, okay, maybe this was because this was the WACO,
the WACO draft,
and therefore it was mutilated, as former Prime Minister would say. But then I said 2010, again he decides that he's not going to support it. You see? So I think that's that's a clear signal that maybe he thinks he is the constitution.
That's a good point, because I was thinking about what we're talking about here, right? So we're talking about a document that doesn't really say anything, that is a mirror of documents in the past that have not really said anything except they are centering elite power into the conversation. And maybe what this document is doing is redeclaring to the public that the Constitution matters not. It's actually us who matter more than the Constitution. Right? It's not in so many words what Louis XIV said, l'état c'est moi, right? Like, I am the state. And therefore, what we'll do is that tutachaza tu na maneno, but essentially what we're telling you is that it is the political arrangements that matter more than this constitution that you were quoting on the streets in June and July 2024. Because that was the first time, I can say, not the first time, but perhaps one of the most memorable and impactful times where the constitution was being used as a weapon to actually, establish the rights of the public. This seems like them now creating documents, to establish the centrality in the rulership of this country and nothing else.
I think I'll say when maybe he said he's going to uphold the constitution during his swearing in, I think maybe he was just talking about like holding it up.
You know what?
It's not about doing the work. Like after that, it's like
hey, Justine.
No,
hey, okay.
it's kind of true.
Upholding the constitution.
Exactly.
You know, maybe I should make this point.
Yeah.
You know, in my community, the Kamba community,
Yeah.
there is the oath, which is feared.
Yes.
So that if you take somebody's land and you're told you must now, you know, swear that this is your land. And when you know that actually it is not your land, but you still want to swear, you put something in your shoes so that there is no connection with the soil. Because it is the soil, when you make that connection and then you make the oath, then the oath will follow you.
Interesting.
So I don't know what he did when he
Pengine
was
angetoa viatu.
making
Basically, we should have a future requirement for all presidents. You must swear the oath when you're standing in the soil without socks.
Also, no Benny Hill present.
Please. There are two more questions that I want to ask on this issue of the MOU, and it's around the need for these kinds of power sharing agreements. Now we see big tent politics all over the world. We've seen it in Germany, we've seen it in the UK, we've seen versions of it across Europe, specifically Scandinavia. They really like these kinds of big tent arrangements. But in our context, has it helped or has it hurt our democratic venture?
Well, I think the problem with what, you know, when we say we have this, whether it's a coalition, it's a merger, it is more to do with how many seats am I going to get? How many cabinet seats? How many parastatals, seats? How many ambassadorships? So, and then some money to escort this arrangement.
Yeah.
And of course, privilege. So it's not about the person in power, what is their manifesto, and what is my manifesto. And therefore, like I have a manifesto about something that is very precious to me is health. So I want health, to be very central in the arrangement that we make. Maybe something else is education. So we never go that route because in the first instance, even the person who is in power does not want to follow their manifesto.
But when you say that, I'm thinking back to all of them, and the thing that was central in all of these manifestos and all of these agreements is positions.
Yes.
Right? Prime Minister, office of, position of, etc., etc. That's a running theme in all of them. Maybe it's speaking to what the true, the core of whichever party's wants are in these documents. Not so much advancement of the public, but advancement of the self and recognition in terms of title. But
and unfortunately, fortunately in Europe, if you come into a coalition, and then whatever you brought to the table as your part of the manifesto, if it is not carried out, you go out and the government collapses. But here, of course, people don't go out. They can't, they can't go out because they are in.
And they are in forever. Manasseh Kigamba on YouTube is following, as well as Kuimuia and Gitonga. David, hi Gitonga. He's enjoying the conversation. He says a great conversation with the professor. We shall attempt to keep the professor giving you very interesting things. So I want us to move now to some of the parallels that we see. One of the things that was part of that document was this direct reference, and I think he's made it before, and you've made it before, to the violence that took place in June last year. So the violence that a lot of young people were killed, abductions, etc. And there are parallels. David Ndii likes to say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? But there are parallels to your own past, that you've gone through in terms of the struggle. I happen to know because of our common, how should I say, interlocutor, that Professor was, in the 70s, was very, very active in student politics, happened to suffer under the Kenyatta regime. Which hand was broken?
I think it's this one.
It was that hand. So he's got his hand broken. In the 90s, was it 1990 you were abducted while leaving your house? But I want to go to the moment in between 1997 and 2002. You are part of the National Convention and you're gaining recognition as this body that is speaking for the public in terms of the reforms that you want to see in power. But then there's a certain political constituency that starts to become uncomfortable with you. Number one, just let us know which political constituency was uncomfortable with you, and then I'll ask the second part of the question.
Basically, when we started, because we were together, civil society, the political opposition then, the faith sector, we were together.
Yeah.
And particularly the young people, the youth, like the Gen Zs. And according to them, they did not subscribe to minimum reforms. They wanted maximum reforms because they thought we would be tricked.
Yeah.
And of course, we waited for a long time to get the constitution, so they were right. So when the political opposition realized that we were getting clout, and we could like call for mass action, people would come out, and we had a very robust agenda. Because actually looking at the documents before coming here of the National Convention Assembly, National Convention Executive Council, their plenaries, like the plenary of August, we were talking about economic and social issues. And some of it was, land. That, land requires to be redistributed, and of course, that's a live wire when you talk about that. And unfortunately, or fortunately, most countries, even Korea, which succeed, land is one of the issues that they address, even education and so on. So when we started talking that language, which even later for Annan also comes back in the agenda 4 to actually those economic issues, and he says you can't run away from these economic issues. So that was, and then the religious sector also, at some point, they said, you guys, you need to compromise and, accept. Now, President Moi is saying that there'll be a commission, you should accept. But I think we were trying to do what like the Gen Zs are doing now, saying we have been promised that there's going to be transformative change, and it never seems to come. Therefore, we need to do everything possible to get our country to be on the right track. And so I think when one goes back to Mau Mau, when one goes back to even in the 70s, when there was Makenya, there was all those, groups saying that this country it has a lot of potential. It must be freed. Then you come to NCA and CC. Then you come to the Gen Zs. It is the same desire for this country to really live up to its promise, because it's a country of a lot of promise.
To live up to its promise. And I want us to pause there, and I'll ask one question, then Tom and Justin, you can chime in. In 97 to 2002, when the religious, body politic at the time started saying compromise, listen to Moi, it reminds me of some of the things that we're hearing today, right? You see Kasmuel Makaure saying, no, let's use the political vehicles that exist, and let's speak to these people, otherwise we're not going to be able to get anything. Knowing now, having lived through that moment, 97 to 2002, when in the face of actually maybe being a few steps away from getting what the youth and the public actually wanted, you were told compromise, and I think to an extent the NC capitulated. Would you advise the youth the same today? Compromise. Just raise your hands and get what you can get.
If I advise them that, they will tell me go to hell. Well, I don't know how far hell is. Because if these young people, like they are 70, 75%, with all those degrees, you don't get a job, you can't make life, and they are in a position to say, even when we know there's a possibility that we are going to get killed,
Yeah.
you know, let's go and do what must be done. So I think there was perhaps an opportunity for a national conversation. But then when the president was able to promise certain things like, okay, I am dropping the finance bill, I am, you know, the cabinet is all sent home. But then later you realize this is just a tactic. And he goes back to his true north.
Yeah.
So even I'm asking myself, if even as this MOU is trying to say that there should be, you know, many people should come together and so on, is it easy to tell these young people come and now sit down and have a conversation with government? I think it's not easy. So one has to look for another way of trying to make a conversation so that maybe this leadership can now realize that we must now go to those people, not us calling them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what NCC was trying to do, was trying to say, okay, we even, you know, will come with a model constitution through Citizen Coalition for Constitutional Change, former Chief Justice William Mutunga leading that. So I think now the agenda has to come from the people because they have waited and the agenda is not coming back from the politicians.
Tom Justin, knock knock.
Yeah.
Who's that?
When someone knocks on the door, unasema yeah.
Yeah. No, jokes aside, who's there?
So who's there? William Ruto. I want to talk. You guys are young guys. Would you talk to him?
No.
I think that door is shut.
That door is shut forever.
Not because people don't think, oh, if we dialogue, there's something that we just know it's not the thing that you need.
Yeah.
And like the kind of change that a lot of people are advocating for, especially the younger generation, it's very radical. Like Prof has experienced like that radical, like the radical nature in asking for change. You're not, you don't want scraps. You don't want them to throw the things that are on the table that they don't need and they're like, oh, you take this. That's not what people want.
Caswell's happy with the arrangement.
Yes.
And Caswell seems to have, he has a political constituency that he's starting to build. Caswell represents some part of the youth.
Yes, because there's a lot of people who are laughing at a lot of the younger generation and saying, why didn't you go to the table and pick something?
When you had a chance,
And I'm like, you'll take that small little chunk, but for how long?
Yeah.
Is that going to be satisfactory in the long run, or does that mean absolutely nothing in the next 2 or 3 years when you're back in the same place or even a worse situation? And this brings me to my question to you, Professor. So you contributed to a book in '96 called The Anatomy of Corruption in Kenya, along current Supreme Court Justice Smokin Wanjala and Professor Owiti Okech. And 29 years later, that's like a whole 30-year-old almost.
A whole Tom plus.
Yes.
Some
It's like,
years you can take.
like, what is the difference now from what was identified then in the book? And is corruption still as prevalent or even worse right now?
Well, I think it is more dramatic. It's really killing the country. Because even when there are institutions that are supposed, like the EACC, you know, the Director of Public Prosecution and so on, there's always a back and forth. Like EACC, you know, sends some cases, then the Director of Public Prosecution sent them back. Some people, you know, go to court and they are told you didn't do wrong, even after the DPP had said they should be taken to court, so they are forgiven. So, and of course, the so-called small people are the ones who are fried. But when you know you're a senior person, you can always get around and you will be free. So what happened is like some of that research we were doing, like the anatomy of corruption, we were somewhat naive to think that because it was done 1993, that now we have come into multi-party politics. Now there is freedom. But when we did it, first of all, the NGO Clarion was proscribed, and we were in trouble. The NIDA had sponsored it. The Minister for International Development had to come from Denmark to come and say, these guys were just doing academic research. This is, and I remember, I think the Minister for Finance was Musalia then. So
Wait,
yes.
Permanently employed.
So that is how we, otherwise we would have been in big trouble. Yeah. But then the laws are, were passed after when Kibaki came in, a lot of laws and the institutions. Actually, in Africa, maybe Kenya has, many laws. Kenya has many institutions, but there is no movement. There is no real movement in terms of, fighting corruption. Yeah. When these wealth declaration forms, we fill them, and that's it. They are kept somewhere safely.
Wait,
why is it that they are not, made public?
Very important.
Yes.
And even audit, like if you want to become a member of parliament, governor, or whatever, there is a lifestyle audit. Even these cases, they take forever. Yes. Some cases drag and they take forever. How come that there isn't, a time frame within, like the presidential election is 14 days. And now NADCO is saying 21. Even in small claim, cases, there is a time frame. Even, I think, sexual offenses, So you can see that the elite who think, this way of living is legitimate, they really are careful to make sure that we can't fight corruption the way it should be. So that's a big agenda. It's a big agenda, I think.
So you have something?
Yeah. I find that term fighting corruption to be, should I say, I think the word is overused or hackneyed, because it's been thrown at us so many times, slaying the dragon of corruption. It's written how it should be done, but it seems to be so impossible whenever we speak about it towards elections. Yeah. It's an election campaigning tool. It's always a bullet point. It's there in the manifestos, but something never seems to connect. There's never, you see that last mile of this person is corrupt, here's what we found, they go to jail for this number of years. We just never close that gap. But then, speaking of elections, Professor, you were mulling over running in 2022, and I'm curious to know what things would have been under you as president. I don't know if that's something we can imagine now, over 3 years later.
Well, I think if you are president and you decide that the constitution must be followed, if you decide that you are going to get people from, everywhere in Kenya, face of Kenya. In actual fact, even when I was a small governor, there are people that we became the equivalent of cabinet because they were sourced by other people. We would say that, from this sub-county, we would like you to source, several people, like what I am supposed to employ myself. But this is the criteria. Yeah. And that's why, we got people who are really very professional. Yeah. So I didn't have to say that, I need to myself appoint them, look for them, because I thought leadership is something that you share. Yeah. And then in terms of, if people know that as the person who is in charge, you don't like corruption. Yeah. When they know that, then they behave. And actually, I got into trouble because some of my very close friends who had helped me in the campaigns, they did things that were not correct. And then we asked them, why don't you look for another job? And then you just listen to the people, you know, because even some of the things that we were supposed to have done, which were, you know, important things, they came from the people themselves through public participation, or even junior people.
Yeah.
Even that health insurance thing came from the minister then and the chief officer and that group. They told me that this is possible. I told them, I don't believe you.
Interesting that you raise UHC now. I wanted to talk about it a bit later on in the conversation, because we're now in the grips of a very serious dilemma in the public with the Social Healthcare Authority, with SHIF, and it's just not, it doesn't seem to be taking, you know. And it was the basis for what was called a very high-octane conversation last week on TV when what I heard was a lot of what I heard was more excuses than anything. You successfully implemented universal healthcare while you were the governor for Makueni County. I mean, it's been the basis for study upon study of how it is that you were able to do it. And, you know, mine's a two-parter again. How did you do it? Are you looking at SHA now and wondering, I went through that, maybe I should be able to advise Ruto and the KK government on how to be able to go about this? Or are there missteps that you're just not even seeing in SHA that you're able to encounter?
I think, as I said earlier, these young people under 35 came to me and told me that we can do this. Because during the campaigns, people had said they have a problem with health. They sell their land, they sell their cows, and all that. And people stay in Kenyatta, you know, until you can pay. So they told me that the money that we collect from the level 4 hospitals is about 100 million when, you know, people are hospitalized and so on.
Yeah.
And they said if we ask 500 shillings from the 250 to, then it was 200,000 households, we will get the 100 million. And therefore, now we would be able to, with 500 shillings per household, they will get the treatment that is available in Makueni. So, okay, I said, you know, have you done your math right? They told me that.
It's too good to me.
It's too good. You know, 500 shillings, that's $5 if it was 500 shillings. So then we said, let's pilot them. And we started by 65 and above for free. And we did 6 months of that. That's 2016. Now, some of the people began to come to hospital because before they couldn't afford. So they would come, they would be admitted. Some of them, it was just a question of like they hadn't been feeding well. So they stay a bit, they get better. Then, you know, they say they don't want to be discharged, they want to stay more. But, you know, we realized that they can, these old people, they can get the consultation, they can get the drugs, they can get when they are admitted, they don't pay. So that gave us comfort. And maybe if in the transition from NHIF to this new system, there was like a transition so that you have a pilot, first of all, to be able to see, is it working, where are the problems? But by that time, we also had made sure that if it is the health facilities, you know, we found about 180-something health facilities. Eventually, we drove that to 239. You know, whatever money was for drugs, it was like 100. We drove to about 300 for drugs alone. So building theaters, building, you know, a mother and child hospital, so that the facilities are there. Also, the staff, you know, are there. And, you know, because the medical people, if you don't treat them well, they go on strike. So, you know, making all that perhaps to be radiant. And therefore, now when we opened it to everybody, and we did now, I was there for 6 years now when everybody could enjoy those services within Makueni. And of course, we're also making arrangements for NHIF for some categories as well, so that when they go out of Makueni, we were able to, like, you get an operation like a mother goes to have a child, it is that 500 shillings. Even, if it is dental, unless you want very fancy teeth, it's still 500 shillings. Even COVID. Some people would come from Nairobi to Makueni during COVID time, still for the 500 shillings. So it is doable, but it's how you first of all use your resources.
Then like, what's the problem then? What's the problem with SHA?
I think first of all, in terms of the capital outlay for it, I think there's too much money perhaps which is being used, which does not have to be used. Like when there was that the IT thing.
System,
yeah, a system.
How much did yours cost? Just so, because like they're saying 104 billion, set up
no, but we had people in IT ourselves, our department, who could do it. So we didn't have to outsource.
So you did it for free, essentially, on the salaries of people.
On the salaries of now, that is the IT department coming to help the health people.
Yeah.
They would do that, and they would do other things to help other departments.
Yeah.
So it's only like when, for example, now dialysis or chemotherapy, there it was subsidized because it was quite expensive, but still not as much as if you came to private. So eventually, even one of the person who led that, one of the young people, because when President Uhuru came to Makueni and we told him, now we are doing it, now I was converted, so I was now a spokesperson for this. He said, it's not possible. I told him we are doing it. And so he told me, Kagwe, to talk to him and to kind of, inform him what we are doing. And so they took the minister, our minister, who was doing, who was helping us to the national level. So when he arrived at the national level, I don't know, what he was asked to do, because he was a competent person, Of course, now there's a bit of distance between myself and him, because he's in the government and I'm out of the government. So we don't have many conversations as we used to.
Well, maybe one conversation you should have is how 104 billion, as you mentioned, has gone into a system that is not working, has not worked, as the equivalent of 805 million US dollars.
I think one of the things that keeps throwing me off about just like the whole figure and like how much it costs, you said you already had like an inbuilt system that you kind of just tapped into, and that made it even more cost effective. See, he keeps saying about those ICT hubs in Ruiru. What are those guys doing? If they're like ICT
hubs in Ruiru, these guys of Mulot who have never gotten these jobs.
Those who are working for AI companies abroad.
Speaking of AI, right? Someone did this comparison on online, right? DeepSeek, that came out of China, was developed with less than $7 million, right? We've done SHA that does not work for 805, and it's a much smaller system. It's not pulling from massive amounts of data, right? It really is with a couple of algorithms. You should be able to make this thing work, and this is I think why this conversation is very, very difficult. They are consistently asking us to ignore the evidence of our eyes, and telling us, no, look, this is why it's not working. Last week we were told it's not working because we don't have a comms center, and now we're going to have a comms center and a short code, so they're even loading even more, But there's a separate question on Makueni. There were the industrial parks. There was value addition that you did for mangoes. And a number of things that you did that you've left in place that now the current governor can take forward. And this is the conversation we're having about the death of industry in Kenya, the death of innovation and business, etc. Again, as the question was being posed to you, were you the president? What would you have done to ensure that we get our industries working, we get our people work here, and our industries moving?
I think what kind of helped me from, especially coming from both the academia and the civil society, it was you let the people do the work. You don't have to overdo the work. Because, like, for example, the Mango plant, we had some of the best people from the private sector, from Makueni, who actually more or less volunteered to help us, establish that. So I think if you ask, for example, business, what is the best thing that can be done so that manufacturing, this industry, you go forward? What is it so that jobs don't, companies don't go to our neighbors and so on? If you listen to them, they are going to tell you what needs to be done. Of course, if again you work with the universities, like the universities, they have a lot of research which is idle on the shelves, and it can be commercialized. It can, so I think for me, and this is something I learned from a mentor, my mentor, Kibaki, Mzee Kibaki, because he wasn't intimidated by people who knew things. He loved those ones. And you brought a good idea. He had the mind to know an idea is good, and he would say, let it be done. You see, so in a way, being a governor or being a cabinet secretary and so on becomes easy. But of course, there are others who don't want you to succeed, so they start now, bringing trouble. But in terms of if you are at the level of the president and you have, a team, so that from your ministers, from you, they feel comfortable. Like Kibaki said, this is the job. Do the job. And it was on very rare occasions that he would, call you and tell you, if it was during cabinet, he would give, conversation direction. But he said, do your job. Of course, if it was apparent you are not able to do the job, then he would ask you to do another job.
Or not do any job. Look, I have one last question on this before we bookend this. I'm sure you guys have something to say, but Tom asked a question about 2022, and you retired, obviously. But you have what seems to be a blueprint, not the blueprint, but certainly a blueprint for how things can be guided in Kenya that seems to have worked. If we're talking about piloting, and Makueni was a pilot phase, and the pilot phase was done, and the verdict is largely successful. There's someone here on YouTube saying, Salimia, my former governor, is a true patriot, DJCK Kenya. Right, so umesalimiwa
umesalimiwa vizuri.
Yes, umesalimiwa vizuri. So, the question begs, why retire? Why not just gun for the top seat? Why not run for the presidency?
There are many times I've been asked to run for the presidency. The first one was actually in the 90s when the opposition wanted a compromise candidate. But that time, our focus was the Katiba. We said that before we have a proper Katiba constitution, it's not easy to be a president, or it's not easy to move the country forward. And of course, in a way, the civil society were very, they really didn't want us to get into politics. So when you got into politics, you were marked, and now Reverend Njoya said Parliament is a graveyard for people. So there was that was the reason then in the 90s. By 2022, when people were saying, apende asipende, let him now ask for the presidency. That time, here we still have to deal with the ethnic question, because somehow, when it comes to election time, people kind of go into their tribal or ethnic cocoons, and then that is a problem. Of course, there is the money. And now it's going to be very difficult, because I think, well, I don't know whether I should say very difficult, but I made that statement when Martha was relaunching our party. I said, the president is very good at last mile politics, and he has money. So those who are opposing him have to think clearly. And actually, in the past, I had told Azimio, part of why it's not easy to, make good progress is you don't focus on detail. Like, you don't have agents. In 2022, you have no agents.
Yeah.
Or you have agents, you are paying very little, somebody comes and pays them more, and the stuff like that. So there is also the question of what monies are needed. Maybe now there's a difference. The young people are saying that, they are going to work very hard, they will volunteer. But having said that, I think it can't be a question of one person saying that I want to be the president. First of all, you shouldn't baptize yourself, so to speak. I think people need to come together. Like, we have the Omtatas, we have the Kigames, we have the Mukisas, we have, the Matianzi, you can mention many people. Now, if the Gen Zs are able to say, there are guys we want to make them sit together, and then we are going to tell them that you have to work together. And of course, there are also, Kalonzo Musyoka, there is Wamunyoro, there is Wamalwa, and so on. That's another group, and another group of like progressive people, and so on. So I think actually the Gen Zs don't know that they hold a very the ace card.
So if they came to you and baptized you today and said, Professor Kibwana, we, the youth of this country, constituting 75% of the population of Kenya, want you to run, would you come out of retirement?
I would. No, I'm not in retirement because I'm teaching.
No, retirement from active politics. Yes.
Of active politics.
Yes.
No, I'm also in active politics because I really talk a lot with the Gen Zs.
Okay.
So I decided that I will retire. I will be retired by the grave. So Mzee Mudi Wawori used to be my boss when he was vice president. There was a time I worked in assistant minister office of the vice president.
Yeah.
He's now, I think, 1927 December, that's 98, about. And he has not retired. He's in business, he's doing,
quite active.
You see, so I decided that retirement, and this is also the same thing that Mohammed Yunus, says in his book, 3 zeros, that really, even you can be there and you can advise, like how traditionally old people would sit somewhere and young people, would come and so on. But I think it's not a question, I believe, of even the young people coming and telling one person that you be a president. It's a group. They have to say that there's this group, you work together first.
Yeah.
After we see how you work together, we are now going to decide who is first among equal. And then you'll work as a group.
To be able to move forward.
Yes. I don't know whether I have scattered the question.
Well, sufficiently enough for us to know that there is hope that if the Gen Zs should say this, then you're not retired. I want us to go to another question that revolves around the Gen Z, which is employment. So again, was it last week or the week before, Justine? We had this show house that was created on how you should prepare to go to the Middle East the week before.
Yeah.
I want you to lead this part of the conversation because she was tweeting very actively in our WhatsApp group, this part of the conversation. Before you do, just say a quick WhatsApp to some of the people who are following. So there's Redemption, Getonga David, as I mentioned. Eli, we are raising the volume for you. Tayo Tripper saying it's good to see Professor Kibuza Kibwana, he's watching from Kiambu. I don't know if it's the same Tayo tripper.
Yeah, I was asking myself the same question.
But Justine, take us through this issue, because it's one that you've done quite a bit of work around.
So I think one of the things I'll just like to confess right now to everyone watching, I am chronically online, and I try to be objective about the conversations that are being had, especially around employment. A lot of younger people, at least people in my circle that I know, are either unemployed or like semi-employed, where your job could end on any day. I am one of those people. So like there's this awareness of like how a salary is not guaranteed. You, even if you get any form of employment, it could end at any time. You don't have any kind of protections in whatever way. That's if you're lucky enough to get a job. So when I was looking at what unemployment does to people, that's when this government was coming up with the idea of exporting labor. And some of us, me and Tom, to be particular, are very angry about it. We advocate for it openly. A lot of younger people advocate for it openly to end, because it doesn't seem like it's an idea that's grounded in giving people actual jobs. It's almost like a gig economy for slavery. Like we can just ship you wherever and then good luck. But at the same time, at the reality of a lot of younger people, because you don't have choices, and obviously there's a money issue at play here. A lot of people who work in the economy right now, let's just say the domestic workers or drivers or people who work a lot of blue-collar jobs, do not get any kind of labor protections. They don't get paid enough. So for a lot of them, if they're not going to get any kind of job, and the jobs that they get here are paying them close to nothing, they don't feel like this is a bad choice. It's a false choice, but they don't feel like it's a bad choice. If I stay here, will I really get the same amount of money, or will I be able to help out my family? So my question to you would be, is this really like a strategy that they're using to solve unemployment, and also to kind of buy the constituency of people who are feeling like they're getting saved from zero employment? Or is this a way for this particular government to kind of mutilate the youth vote, and also make it very difficult for anyone who's trying to create jobs here? Yes.
I think it begins with what kind of policies, do you have, which are going to ensure that particularly the private sector can be vibrant and can be able to grow jobs. And of course, one of the things is like the taxation, that there is, which makes many of these companies, go away. Then there's also the corruption thing, because if people, realize that they have to pay even to get a company registered, and they have to, there are many places where you have to pay if it's work permits from people you're bringing abroad, if you're bringing equipment and all that. So I think, and we are not, kind of saying that Kibaki, did everything, but he knew that you must have the policies that, will make the private sector thrive and in turn create jobs. And even when you're thinking of you're thinking of self-employment, then again, you have also to make that attractive so that people, can make jobs for themselves. So you look at the economy in its totality, so that it is an economy that therefore can support the population that you have. If you take people abroad in the ways in which they're being taken abroad, it's an admission that you are failing. It is an admission. It's just like those things we were discussing before. You know, those reports. You have a problem, a report. Another report. So you have a problem with youth unemployment and general unemployment, and then you tell them, we are taking you Maju. And of course, those places, you know, like if it's in, you know, the Arab world, kids suffer. You know, they suffer. And today now, with the problems that are immigration, you know, like if it's America now in the current context, if it is, you know, France, if it is Germany now, you know, many of those countries, they really don't like the foreigners. They say, you're taking our jobs and all that. So, and even domestically, when you say that you're creating 30,000 jobs, and then you say now, you know, this is big stuff. So how many young people every year, about 500 to 800,000, maybe more, a million, you know, come to the market, to the job market. Therefore, you must have a Marshall Plan. You must think of a Marshall Plan. And actually, somebody who is trying something like that is the governor of Muranga, Kanata. You know, why, for example, don't we say that in each of these counties, we are going to have a national county youth service, which will train people train them properly in terms of, these machines which do the roads and the big things, not training them to do small things. Then you train them, then you make sure that there is not the hustler fund of 500 bob. You know, there is, you know, real money that people can really borrow at proper, you know, interest rates for young people. Because even in BBI, in whatever, they kept on saying they'll give people loans and then there'll be 7, I think, years of without whatever. So I think it is something that requires actually doing it with the young people, telling them, let's sit here. What do you think can happen so that you become part, actually you have citizenship? Because citizenship is not just having a paper. It is, how am I recognized in my country and what am I benefiting, you know? And I don't think it's impossible to do. But again, we have to say there's going to be, you know, absolutely no corruption or people will be punished, so that you release the money to do those things that must be done, you know. And I think in terms of education, our people, you know, our young people are educated, although there's a bit of a problem recently, you know, with these school fees and stuff. But imagine that the diaspora, the people who have now taken themselves, it's okay when you take yourself abroad and when you study, when you get a job, because even in terms of the remittances, which come, I think now they are more than even coffee
and tea, horticulture.
Actually, is that a good sign or a bad sign? I've seen some political analysis saying that if people are sending more money home than we are exporting in terms of coffee and our industry and our exports, that's not a good thing. Is it a good thing?
No, it's a good thing that the money is coming, but it's a bad thing that the things we are doing here cannot
match that.
Cannot match that. But also, it means that if people abroad realize, Kenyans abroad realize that home now is a place you can come invest, you can come and, you know, do good stuff. You have people to drive Kenya who are abroad. You know, whether it's your private sector, whether it is your there are so many of them, and yet they bring that money. We are happy, but we don't want to give them the vote. Because they're very clever. If we give them the vote, they might vote in ways in which the elite doesn't want.
Grace, sponsored by Grace on YouTube, says, imagine exporting Kenyans to slavery, like now Ruto saying 30,000 jobs to clean sewage around Nairobi River. You just wonder, is Ruto having some mental illnesses? She describes it very specifically here, or taking Kenyans for granted. And I was just skimming through Kenya's foreign policy document, and one of the things that they are interested in is economic diplomacy and employment promotion. So let's bring this conversation home. with this question. So a variation of what Justine was asking. If I'm a young person today, I can't find work here. I can't find even these menial jobs that are being given to people on the ground. The option is out there. I mean, the United Arab Emirates' entire employment policy is based around expatriate and low-skilled labor, right? It's literally in the brochure for the investment, investment pitch. Why not go there? What should a young person who's in that situation actually think of?
Well, when one is desperate, they can do anything. And even if, for example, they thought that abroad works, first of all, many countries now are not going to give you the visa. You have to go as an undocumented immigrant. Depending on how you will go to Europe, to whatever, like kids who are walking through the Sahara and the Mediterranean, and people are dying, they're getting arrested there and so on. So at some point they'll realize that that's not an option. So they will come back and say, it's not possible that this country cannot cater for me. And so the Gen Z say, since I will die anyway, because I don't have the means to sustain my life, it doesn't matter if I die now saying that what is happening is not acceptable. And I think that is what happened in the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, the young person who burnt himself because they denied him a license, I think, for his rickshaw,
for his handcut,
whatever it is, and then they buried him, with a flag, and it was a huge thing. So I think leaders here must know, or should know, or need to know that if you push these young people to the wall, they'll push back.
I don't mean for that to be, or rather, I don't know if you mean for that to be, a warning of what's to come, almost like a signaling that there's fire on the mountain. But it feels as if that moment actually isn't too far off. Where institutionally, there's no way in for young people. Politically, you only go there when you capitulate and you become, part of that system, a la Casmuel, and socially, there doesn't seem to be any mobility anymore between, between where you are and where you aspire to be. But I'd hate for us to end on a hopeless note.
Sure.
Justine, I'll pass this one to you first, and then to Tom, and then to Prof. What then should be the message of hope at this point in time, where we're facing such a dire set of circumstances? The avengers of the political class have now come together. Was it Thanos? I don't know which analogy I should use.
And the hammer, the hammer is this report.
The hammer is this report.
Thing,
Don't worry, Prof. I mean, these are analogies. I'll ask someone to send you a few links so we can catch up. But like, what message of hope, Justine, should we be sending to our fellow young people about looking at their country?
Okay, so first of all, I'll just like to say it's boat season in Nairobi again. And this county is building an underground tunnel for pedestrians, I think, somewhere in town, and they're going to close the road for a month.
So it should be submarine season.
Yes, so it's going to be submarine season too. So I think we should be hopeful that is going to work out for us. I think it's a big deal that they're creating roads that are actually catering for pedestrians for once. So I don't know if it's going to, don't hold me on this, but I think as swamp people, all of us who've had to wear gumboots and like trudge the course of pedestrianhood, maybe this is going to shift. So the thing I'll also say is Kenyans are still, even amidst everything that's going on, a lot of Kenyans are kind, they are generous, and they're very good at making memes. We laugh all the time. So it kind of just speaks to at our core, we're still like really amazing people. We still have a lot to look forward to. And just to paint a picture of like what happened over the last week, I know a lot of tragic news stories have come our way, but also the Lionesses won the second leg of the HSBC challenges. Which is really cool. You know, in this country, we might have someone who keeps disturbing the Lion of Judah with his missionary work, but at least the Lionesses are roaring, you know. We have people who are still holding the line for Kenya and representing us in that way. And I was at Forum Sieve, their International Women's Day day, and there were so many men and women who are in their communities. They're helping young women and girls in a lot of very hard conditions. A lot of who have been rescued from child marriage. Giving information about sexual and reproductive health. Like there's a lot of community in the country that is probably not magnified. We don't get to see that on TV, but those stories are there. Those people, those communities exist. And I would urge Kenyans who are chronically online like me to put the phone down sometimes and go to those communities. There's so many people around you doing amazing things. And I think if those people are still there, even though they're under-resourced, which I wish they weren't, if those people still exist and are holding the line for the sanity of so many people and the livelihoods of so many people and the future of so many young people, then I don't think we should give up hope. I think we should keep going. We should infiltrate those communities more, put ourselves in those situations where if you're donating your time, if you're donating money, resources, those are the things that are going to make that shift. If people can see that humanity and they can show up for each other, it makes it harder for someone to just pay you off because there's more value between me and you than what a 500 shilling note could do.
Well done, Justine. Good points. Good points about hopefulness. Sometimes we tend to forget that there's so many people who are working and doing good things. Good comedy included.
Good comedy. Can't measure.
Yes. Tom, how about you? What note do you want to end the show on? We usually ask you about what's coming. I mean, there's still public participation and stuff, but spice that up a little bit with what you're hoping for your country to be.
Still getting on public participation. I'll stay there, but this time I'll take a different angle. I've just seen from a friend who tweeted this that the report for how many Kenyans are online by the data reportal, that's a website online, it says that TikTok has 15.1 million Kenyan users, 15.1 million. Facebook, a similar amount. YouTube has 11 million. And Twitter has 2.33 million people.
Interesting.
Now, that's not to mean that these platforms can be compared in their value because they serve different purposes. But there's something that is often said that TikTok was where a lot of the protests was galvanized. And Twitter is where a lot of these ideas came from. And the things that were at the core of the revolution came from. And if you look back and see these figures, you see the impact that was caused by this mobilization that happened on these platforms. Also did my homework and went to see how many votes President Ruto got in 2022, and it was 7.1 million votes. That's just half
of the people who are on TikTok.
People that are on TikTok and Facebook.
Incredible.
And the folks have pseudo accounts as well. I'm one of them, but but that's not to mean that the accounts reduce the 15 million in any way. Raila got 942 million votes. Add these and they still don't come to the figure of Kenyan users on TikTok. Now, I know that these users also, the number constitutes of people who are not of voting age as well. But I don't want to believe that that's even 10% of the 15 million people that are on those websites. So just digesting these numbers and just trying to make meaning out of them, and you immediately realize that someone can win an election online and win it clean without any debates.
Interesting.
So as much as the president and everyone surrounding him go online and say wala watu wa mtandaoni, I don't want to believe that that's all the numbers mean. I think these numbers mean something, and these numbers mean that this is a potentially difference-making bloc that is waiting to be fed ideas and to be fed the right candidate for an election. And 2027 is one of those. We've seen people even coming together and shake the country, as we saw last Sunday, because of a protest at a church, because of something that was donated that was thought to be from illegal proceeds. So if you just sit on those numbers, 15 million people on TikTok, 15 million on Facebook, 2.3 million on Twitter, and you look at the amount of votes that came out, and this was just, I think it was 30% voter turnout at the election, something close to that. You imagine the number of people that are not online that showed up on June 25th that were moved by the people on these platforms, and the power that is on the hands of Kenyans on these platforms, as much as they're labeled watu wa mtandaoni, is immense. Now that's the first part of this. The second part is the public participation part, which is a lot more serious and that should keep you engaged. So for this times, I'd like to point out a document that was published by the Ministry of Education on the 5th of March. And it's with regards to the competency-based education, or CBC. And this is a call for people to come out, and there are going to be dialogue sessions in all 47 counties. This was launched on 7th of March at not Makueni, sorry, that's a word that's but it's something close, Machakos. And on the 7th of March 2025. And it's going to be running from the 7th. That's when the Education Cabinet Secretary, Julius Migos Ogamba, launched these dialogue sessions. They're supposed to happen between 7th of March. Only one of them was happening then. Today, there should be around 19 that have already happened. And we should have around 28 left for the coming few days. And so 11th of March, we'll have around 10, 15 happening, and then all the way to the 13th of March, which is that on Thursday? Yes, that should be on Thursday. And so these sessions are meant to quote these objectives here to update stakeholders on the status of the competency-based education implementation, to provide platform for stakeholder participation, to appraise stakeholders on teachers recruitment and capacity building, and lastly, to receive feedback from stakeholders on the implementation of the CBE system. This system has been at the center of a lot of controversy, a lot of missteps by the government, a lot of, should I call them, having almost no decision making, just a bit of, should you call them, instability in the implementation processes, and the amount of on what books should be read by these students in these schools, and also a huge gap in terms of the number of teachers that should implement this system. So people should step out between the 10th, which is today, and the 13th of March. You can go to their website. It's a lot of high schools mostly, but I from what it looks like, it seems like it's a central position within these counties where people can go and share their views on the curriculum. So that's for us, this session of the public participation.
All right, so looking forward to that, and there's so many things that can be contributed, hopefully, that shape the law. Justine, someone responded to your closing thoughts, and they said it's J, but not really though. Says if only government invested more in the communities that Justine is referencing, fewer people would even look abroad for their solutions. And I'm just using that to analyze a picture that I've seen on X today, where the president was addressing people in Eastleigh. And you know, for his people and his handlers, the optics are, look at how many people have come to speak to the president. But Nanjala Nyabola, who's a political analyst, author of real note, says something really astute. That only shows me that this is youth unemployment, and it's out of control. That on a Monday, mid-morning of a Monday, that so many people can come out and speak to you. You know, no matter how much of a draw you are, this should be a concern. You know, but Prof, I want you to give us your closing thoughts, and maybe, you know, pose it around, if I can help you with directing your closing thoughts around this same question of the youth, and you know, you had referenced the fire on the mountain, right? But is there a path that the youth of this country can walk towards a future that they really, truly deserve? I mean, these might be questions that you pose to yourself as a young person when you were doing the national convention. What is that path, at least from your point of view? What's the path forward for young people in this country?
First of all, let me say that, you know, you put a thought in my head that one can say, what about being a TikTok president?
There is one actually.
Yes.
The Philippine president.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Bonbon Marcos Jr. Yeah, he won it on TikTok. So
TikTok.
that's very possible. It's not just a word.
And of course, X Spaces.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yes,
they influence,
yes.
like, you know,
you
the
break
X.
down your policies
Yes,
and
yes.
make the pathways to what can be done. I think it's possible.
But I think in terms of hope, the young people really have demonstrated resilience. And this is insistence that the country can work. You know, let the who are giving up. You see, so that's a very, very meetings by politicians. Sometimes some go because it's a job. You might be ferried there and you might get 500 bob or, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not the kind of employment we are thinking about. Just like I said earlier, when it is for young people, I believe that the jobs that need to be mobilized are jobs that are meaningful and which will take in, you know, many young people, not 30,000, not that kind of stuff. And that's why I'm talking about a Marshall Plan. Even earlier on, when Kenyatta said tripartite agreement and said that so many, you know, people need to be employed, that was something that then, you know, they thought was possible. But, you know, if you have real, these industrial parks, you have real ones, and you can create them. You can create, for example, through agriculture, like in Machakos, again, Bishop Masika has this 1 acre rule, where just on 1 acre, you're able to, you know, have some micro irrigation. They become even millionaires. You know, people move from Nairobi and they have gone to back home. And young people can do that when they realize that they can make money through this, you know, agriculture. So, you know, I think that even getting people involved in development, I remember we would say that in a small place we called a cluster, you know, you begin to ask them, what is it that you want to do for yourselves? And you make monies available, you know, because you're taking care of the monies. You don't want, you know, people to steal the monies. So I think it's really this shift the young people are looking for a government that, in terms of the policies, they can really be, there are good policies so that the private sector works, the young people themselves can, you know, do their own things. It's easy to get credit. So I don't think it's rocket science, and that's why, for me, this push of the young people now getting into leadership, saying that they're going to be part of leadership. They're not just now going to sit around and promote only others. I think that's also something that must be, you know, must be emphasized. The national government, even unfortunately during Kibaki's time, there was to be the national youth movement, so that there was a law to say that they should actually elect people from wards then, so that there is a movement of young people now which gets involved in the dialogue of what do they want. But again, you know, people said this is empowering them too much and they're going to overturn you. But now, in the absence of that, they have found a bypass. So I hope that, you know, that this government, another government, is going to say that young people must have a channel organizing themselves. But when all is said and done, it is really the infrastructure, the policy infrastructure that you create so that we have an economy that can provide, as Kibaki tried, if that had gone on, then we would be in another, place. And again, for the middle class to also be more engaged. Because, sometimes they are feeling they're in a comfort zone, they are getting, a bit of money still.
We had a bit of a debate, sorry, not to interrupt you, but we had a bit of a debate just before we got on set about that very question. That, especially with this labor issue, that, the middle class, the rich, the middle class, the poor, is somewhat set up like a pyramid scheme where the people at the top give less to the people in the middle, give less to the people who are poor. And then the analogy that was being given by one of our producers, Barack, was that, there'll be a house help somewhere that you pay 20,000, shillings. But that house help has someone who's taking care of her kids or his kids that will be paid 3,000 shillings. And the nature of employment sometimes seems almost predatory at every level. But I think the point that he was making is about whether the middle class and generally classes in our country can relate to one another's struggles. What's your view?
Well, I think we have to come to that point so that, for example, the middle class population that is able to employ, for example, house assistant, to employ security and so on, by and large, they don't follow the labor laws, by and large. But you see, getting to that understanding that even a huge population of young people in the rural areas on this piece rate, like one day, 500 bob, sometimes they're told 200 bob, whatever it is. Again, if that is organized, that is something. But again, we are emphasizing real jobs. We are emphasizing, real jobs. And so the call for the middle class to realize that if they are not present in these struggles, then they will stop being middle class. So this comfort that they have is momentary comfort. I think that message, like I remember in the 90s, when we realized that we were now getting somewhere in terms of our struggle against the Moi dictatorship, was when you saw people coming in the demonstrations wearing, Nike, wearing Adidas. You realize now that's another class. They have realized that, like lawyers, there's no law which you can practice because, the system does not believe in law, so there's no law for you to go to the court. So I think if you have the middle class and you have the Gen Zs or young people, and of course, ultimately, Gen Zote, saying that we just want a better country. We are not really, we don't want to drive, I have to be careful, what I say, that why can't we have a good country? Why can't we have, a constitution that works? Why can't people do the correct things? Why must people take so much, from all of us? Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. But I think there has to be a forum where young people particularly, whether it's self-organized, where they say truly, this is the Kenya that we want.
The Kenya that we want. What a way to end it. And Prof, you've given us quite a bit to think about and to ruminate about in terms of the position of the youth. I want to say thank you. My final thoughts are really around the same question of the youth. And while I was away, because I've been away, and these people have brought in guests. Abigail, by the way, where's my camera?
There was almost a coup.
There was a coup plot out there called Abigail.
You're not a proper
I want to meet
leader.
you here. Yes.
Who doesn't let go?
Yeah. No, in this respect, I am not letting go. But while I was away and I was traveling, I was doing two things. I was training I was training some journalists last week in Uganda, and I don't want us to look at the situation and be like, oh, at least we're not there. But, there are some things that are happening there that are very, very scary. I was walking down the street from where our hotel was, and you have a person in a balaclava, fully armed to the teeth with a big rifle, electric wire, and military fatigues, just standing there, posing as a real threat. And then while I was there, there's a constituency called Kawempe in Kampala that's having party primaries, because there's a by-election there. And the violence that was meted against some of the protesters by this police squad called JAT was just, it makes your stomach turn. That our leaders are learning from one another worries me, because given that, Uganda is where it is, in terms of the transition that seems to be coming or will be forced by further time in its politics, that they've resorted to such unhinged and sort of open meeting of violence against the people should concern all of us. Yeah. So one part of my closing thoughts is around warning that there is always a possibility that card can be used. There's a conversation that I had, and I keep on referring to this, about the 4 pillars of leadership, where one is popularity, the other is money, the other is political consensus, and the fourth is violence. That we need to remember that violence is a tool, and violence is a tool that can be deployed against us, and we need to also stand in solidarity with members of the public in Uganda who are facing this issue. And say that even if we are your neighbors, we know that this is not okay, that your democracy matters to us, and that if things can continue going in the way they're going, we really just offer our thoughts for you and stand in solidarity for you, especially our journalistic fraternity, some of whom were targeted. There was a young man who was being raised for money after being hit in the eye and not having insurance, etc. That's a whole kettle of fish. So that's one part, just to remind people that there are things that are happening around us. There are fires that are happening around us that we ought to pay attention to. The second is one thing that I was doing in February, which was for the first time ever. I was invited to go and give a lecture, by this organization called ZAM, and it's a Nelson Mandela lecture. And the theme of my lecture was, the title of my lecture was Souls on Fire. But I don't speak too much about it. I'm thankful for the opportunity, and if people want to watch it, it's online. But I want to close with the words of someone else who reflected on this question of the soul in terms of leadership and the future of the public. That person published an anthology of poems that is called These Words. And that person is with us here today, Professor Kivutha Kibwana. And I want to read 2 parts of, I believe it's your first poem, which is called Mend My Soul. And it says, disperse evil, my voice is raised. Seed my land with sanity, listen to my country, save my country. And another part says, grant us an eternal thirst for change. Here I am. Teach us. Revolution, like charity, begins at home. Embrace me. Find us the courage to seek martyrdom. Hear us. Rise us a new struggle. Professor Kibwana, thank you very much for joining us on The Big Picture. Thank you very much for your words and for your wisdom across the years. We will continue to call on you, no doubt, in X Spaces as well as on this platform, to ask you questions, to critique you where you might go wrong, because in as much as we've had a very interesting conversation, it is not writing a hagiography of Professor Kivutha Kibwana, but one in which we would like to keep your voice out in the public. My name's John Allen Namu. Tom, can you say bye-bye to your people?
By my people.
Especially those ones who you're wearing the chains.
What's my
I saw
camera?
this
What
young
is my camera?
I saw this man wearing chains. I was like, well,
It was just one chain.
advertisement.
This is what your boss does when they see you. When you see you shining.
Yeah. No, I was nilisikia kiwaru sana. I was like, why didn't I wear? And obviously, Justine, as usual, humor, wit, and deep intelligence, as usual. Thanks for delivering the goods on this episode. My name is John Allen Namu. Obviously, you can and will catch, and I'm saying will, you shall catch this episode of The Big Picture on all podcasting platforms, on Spotify, on Apple. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get through to you the full show today on X because there seems to have been a problem with X itself, not with our account. So it's not our fault. Uliza Elon, right? So next week, hopefully we'll be there, as well as with the 15.1 million people on TikTok. We are coming. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Thank you for all of you who followed the many comments that we've seen. Tayo Tripper, sponsored by Grace, Getonga, David Redemption, DJ CK, Manasseh. All of you guys, you really help us make this show better. Give us your critique, your comment, as well as your opinions about how this country and this continent can move forward. Shout out to you, all of you. Have a nice night.
And thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
has been very special.
Yeah.
I actually feel younger because of being with you guys.
It's the closer you are to Tom, the younger you feel.
It happens just by proximity.
Yes. It's his aura. Good night, everybody. Good morning from wherever you're watching. Catch us on the next one next week. Cheers, guys.